Hello and welcome to the RPG Blender, where we give lesser played games and forgotten settings the roll the dice they deserve. I'm your host, Game Master George, and today we are continuing our look at running the games in the Kids on Bikes series. That's Kids on Bikes, Teens in Space, and Kids on Brooms. Each of these games share similar mechanics, but have their own unique elements that help to drive it toward their individual inspirations. So far in this series, we've looked at the setting, where we focused on how your players will be collaboratively building the world that they'll be playing in. We've also looked at character creation, where not only will your players build their own characters, they'll also be answering relationship questions back and forth to define how they know each of the other PCs. And last time, we talked about the shared rules of the systems. These are the rules that are the same across all of them, the general mechanics by which these systems run. So now today, we're going to talk about each of these systems' unique individual mechanics. These are the bits that separate them from the other games, that make them unique in the way that they run, and help to build the atmosphere that each setting is trying to invoke. Each system has something unique about it, however small it might be, that allows its mechanics to point toward the desired theme. So if this seems useful to you, go ahead and click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you can be notified when the remaining parts of the series go live and be able to enjoy our future RPG tutorials. So without any further delay, let's dive into Let's Run Kids on Bikes, the unique rules. So we've talked about the general mechanics of the game, whereby each of your players will have a specific die assigned to a statistic. When it comes time to make a challenge based on that statistic, they will roll that die. If they roll the maximum number of the die, they roll again, and continue until they either pass the desired difficulty or cease rolling the maximum number. Whatever they rolled is then compared to the target number of the challenge, which determines the threshold by which your players fail or succeed. So starting with the original Kids on Bikes, let's dive into the unique elements that each of these games presents. Kids on Bikes brings to the table the idea of powered characters. Look at any 80s adventure movie or horror movie that this could be based on. In many of those, you'll find that there is one character which is an outsider in the group, someone that generally joins while the adventure is already in progress, and who has something that is odd or unexplainable about them. To borrow a modern example, this would be the 11 of Stranger Things, a character with abilities that exist outside of the realm of what is normally available to the player characters. This is what Kids on Bikes calls a powered character. And the way that they handle it is actually quite ingenious. Whenever you have this kind of extra character that is outside of the player's control, who has powers beyond their abilities, you run the risk of taking agency away from the players, about making the game stop being about their actions, and instead be about a story of the game master playing with themselves by running their NPC through their storyline, with which the player characters are just kind of along for the ride. It loses enjoyment for the players because they're no longer actively directing the story. But Kids on Bikes found a way to actually put this agency back on the players. You see, while this powered character is something that you, the game master, will be creating, it is controlled by your players. Before the game begins, you're going to define a number of characteristics of this character. These are going to be personality traits which drive the way that it acts. Then you're going to give out these personality traits to each of your players. Whenever one of the personality traits should dominate their response to a scene, that player takes control of the NPC. They will then direct its actions appropriately according to its personality, until such a time as one of the other personality aspects draws the focus. With this in mind, you are never actually controlling this NPC. You create this NPC and then you throw it to your players. Your players then have complete control over the actions of the powered character. This drives the agency back onto them and keeps them from feeling like you're stealing the spotlight. This allows you to have plots that are centered around this powered character, without your players feeling like they're being cut out of the story. Now, of course, they wouldn't be called powered characters if they didn't have powers. In addition to giving your players personality traits that they will control, you also give them access to individual powers within this powered character's arsenal. These are special abilities that your powered character has access to, which your players can then use in order to help them in specific situations. Again, this is completely under the control of your players. Each powered character will have a number of powers assigned to them. In my opinion, a good number for this is equal to the number of players that you have. This way, each of your players can have a personality aspect as well as a power that they have dominance over. In order to use one of these powers, the player who controls that power will state that they want to use it. They will then spend a number of power points determined by you, the game master, depending on the impact that this power has, from the powered character's psychic energy. Once the power is decided to be activated and the psychic energy is spent, the player in charge of that ability will then roll 2d4 dice and compare it to a target number, again assigned by you, the game master. As they are rolling 2d4, try to keep that in mind when assigning the difficulty to this value, that they're going to be rolling values between 2 and 8. Once the roll is completed, you'll compare the two numbers. If the dice roll is greater than or equal to the target number, then the powered character suffers some kind of minor physical impairment while the power activates. Otherwise, if the target number is higher, then the player in charge of that power can continue to spend psychic energy in order to increase the die roll at a rate of 1 per psychic energy. Or they can choose to have the attempt fail. Once the action is completed, if the psychic energy has hit 0 or lower, very bad things will happen to the powered character. While the impact from a success while using their psychic power is minimal, if they are reduced to 0 or fewer psychic energy, then there will be a major detrimental impact upon the powered character. Something intense, violent, maybe even life-threatening. Decided upon by you, the game master. Now, of course, the powered character can replenish this psychic energy. The means by which they do so should be story-based. If they get a good night's sleep, then they should be able to regain some, if not all, of their psychic energy. Or the powered character could instead be fueled by hunger, becoming more and more ravenous as they spend their psychic energy, and then being able to replenish it by gorging themselves on solid sustenance. Or maybe the powered character simply needs a quiet moment to relax and meditate. In these cases, you should hint toward that rather than outright telling your player characters, alright, he needs to eat now. Instead, the powered character should begin eyeing the food around as they walk through the town, looking through the window at the nearby butcher shop, closed for the evening, but with meats still on display. Once your players figure out the means by which they can recharge their new powered friend, you can work in methods to deprive them of that in order to raise the tension when there are moments where the psychic energy needs to be expended in a quick burst. And that's about it for powered characters. In all other respects, this is basically another player character that's shared amongst your party. They have their statistics, which they will roll just like your player characters will. And aside from the mechanics of determining who's in charge of the scene, and the psychic powers, there really aren't that many differences from just using it as another player character. However, the freedom that you, the game master, get to incorporate this NPC into your storyline works wonders when it comes to writing your adventure. There are very few games that give you this kind of license to create a character and then have it be a focal point of the story without your players feeling like they are being left out. This is probably my favorite of the unique mechanics, and it's something that I've considered porting to other systems as well. Moving along, we have Teens in Space. Teens in Space actually has two unique elements to its mechanics. First, we have the ships, and then we have items. While your players are building out their character sheets, they will also be building out their ship. This will include assigning dice to specific attributes like their thrusters or their cannons. These statistics work just like for the player characters. If your pilot's attempting to make their ship go fast, they will roll their flight in addition to whatever die is assigned to the ship's thrusters. Meanwhile, if someone is attempting to make another ship go boom, they will roll their flight in addition to whatever offensive weaponry die they have assigned to the ship. Meanwhile, also assigning unique improvements. The improvements are similar to the strengths that your players have already given to themselves. Each of them gives slight mechanical improvements, things that can allow various functions on the ship to improve, or to give unique abilities which your players can use while operating the ship. Things like cloaking devices in order to remain hidden, or powered armor that your players can then use while they're in defense of the ship. Your players will build the loadout while they're creating their characters, and then they'll have chances to improve the ship later during play. Now, where the ship does have some slight differences is with combat. For the most part, combat functions the same. You take a die that is appropriate, and then you roll it against your opponent's die. So when it comes time for the combat, your players will make either their flight or fight rolls as appropriate, while also rolling the stat assigned to the ship. Your players can also spend their adversity tokens in order to improve rolls like normal, but you can also sacrifice improvements. So if your ship is being attacked, you could say sacrifice the holodeck by putting it in the way of a blast so that nothing vital on your ship gets destroyed. The other mechanic that adds a slightly unique taste to this is the heat meter. Whenever you try to push your ship beyond the bounds of what it should normally be able to do, you will increase the heat meter. This doesn't happen with normal use, but if you try to make its normal functions extend far beyond their normal reach, then you might find that you are needing to build up some heat. Also, if you fail in a defensive task with the ship, you can voluntarily gain some heat in order to lessen the impact of that failure. There are also some improvements which require you to increase the heat meter when you use them. Once your heat meter fills up, 3 things happen. First, improvements which require increasing the heat meter can no longer be used. Second, your crew can no longer increase heat in order to minimize the effects of a failed defensive challenge. And third, anytime your crew does fail a defensive challenge, the threshold of failure increases by 1. So a failure threshold of momentary inconvenience would instead increase to damage. This persists until your crew is able to reduce the heat. They can do so by spending 1 hour in normal ship use. Every hour spent will reduce the heat meter by 1. Or, after an hour of the ship being completely powered off, the heat meter will reset to 0. That's it for the ships, but the one other aspect that is unique to this system is items. Whereas in the other games, you're playing as younger individuals who likely have less access to money and thus things, in this system, you are teens with your own spaceship, going around doing work in order to gain credits and be able to purchase things. As such, there is a chart for you to consult to try to figure out how much things should cost. This depends on the rarity of the item as well as the quality that they're looking for. Now, what this game does not do is provide you with a list of items because, as the game puts it, it would be impossible to provide an exhaustive list of that. As such, it relies on the creativity of your players in asking for things, and on you, the game master, providing them to determine what is and is not available. The game does provide this helpful chart for determining how much such an item should cost. And that's it for the Teens in Space unique rules. Finally, let's take a look at Kids on Brooms. Kids on Brooms' unique aspect should be pretty obvious. It's magic. With a Kids on Brooms system, your players have a free-form magic creation system that they can use in order to work magical effects. However, like with normal checks, these magical abilities come down to the same mechanic of rolling whatever stat is appropriate. So if your player would like to cast a spell in order to make himself move fast enough to evade that incoming blow, then they would be making a magic flight check. They will roll their flight die, as well as a bonus 1d4. This is their magic die, which they will roll any time that they are attempting to cast a spell. Finally, they will add any relevant statistics from their age, as well as any bonuses they might have from their wand. They can then spend adversity tokens, like normal, to arrive at their final rolled number. Honestly, it's very similar to the base game when it comes to the ability checks. Where it's slightly different is that they actually provide you, the Game Master, with formulas in order to determine what the difficulty of any given effect should be. Now, these are pretty basic. There's nothing overly complicated here. You're simply going to define 4 elements to the spell. First is going to be the magnitude of the effect. This is going to be how magical the effect is. If it's something that could happen naturally, then they add +1 to the difficulty. Meanwhile, if it's something that absolutely breaks the rules of reality, then that is a reality-breaking effect and adds +7. Then there is the area of effect. If the thing being affected is about the size of a book or smaller, then you again add +1. If instead you're trying to affect something that is a classroom size or larger, you add another +7 to the roll. Your player also needs to determine the length of the effect. If it's something that's instantaneous, which is not going to continue after the moment the spell is cast, then there is no increase in difficulty. From there it steps up minutes, hours, days, weeks, or permanent, ranging from 0 to +6 for a permanent effect. Finally, how experienced is the player character with this spell? If it's something that they've mastered, then they add +0 to the difficulty. But if it's something that they have never seen or heard anybody do, then they get a +5. This one you'll probably need to ask your players to think honestly about if this is something that they have done before. Though in the case of something truly unique, you can probably state with certainty where it lies. In general, I think it's a good idea for the characters to have mastered one spell per age category that they're in. So a child character might have one spell that's mastered, a teen might have 2, and a faculty member should have 3. From there, cast, witnessed, and inexperienced depends on your party, and probably how studious the various characters are. Once you have your final target number, which will range from 2 for a very minor instantaneous effect, to a 25 for something truly massive, permanent, and never before done, your players will compare that value to the value they rolled. Like with any other check, the threshold by which they meet or fail to meet the difficulty will determine the threshold of success or failure. Now, unlike in the main checks, degrees of success don't make the spell go off better. Instead, they make it go smoother. It looks more practiced, like the character has been doing this effortlessly. However, the failures still do increase the effect depending on how bad the failure is. Where the threshold of success will come into play a little stronger is when you are trying to cast your spell on another living creature. When you are casting a spell on another creature, they can attempt to resist the roll. They do so by attempting the same roll against the same spell. This will usually have the same difficulty class. However, if it's a spell that they know better or worse, it could differ slightly. They then compare the thresholds to see who has succeeded by the larger number. If the offensive caster has the greater threshold of success, then their spell goes off and the defensive player is affected. Meanwhile, if the defensive player has beaten the offensive player's success threshold, then he has successfully defended himself from the spell. The only other aspect to this rule is with potions. Potions follow the same mechanics of magic, aside from the fact that the players must have access to a laboratory with essential ingredients, and must have time in order to craft the potion. However, despite this time, they must be making a snap decision roll. There are no planned actions for potion creation. However, if you, the Game Master, decide to, you can allow your players to have practiced recipes like they have practiced spells, which they could get a planned action for. They will then make that roll, just like if they were casting a spell. However, it will be creating a potion which they can use later in order to gain the benefits of that effect. There are some restrictions on this, of course. The effect that is being done with the potion must make sense for something that is being imbibed. Your players can't drink a potion that will magically teleport their broom to them. And you as the Game Master might decide to throw in some unique requirements for some particularly powerful potion that they're trying to create. In the end, however, the potions still fit into the same mechanics of the spellcasting roll. And that's it. It's not a complicated mechanic by any means, but it adds a large degree of depth to the actions that the player characters are able to take. It essentially takes the role of the powered character from Kids on Brooms and makes it unnecessary, as your player characters are now able to do things that are beyond anything that a powered character would be able to do. But that's what drives it more toward the Harry Potter theme than the Stranger Things. If you took a child from Harry Potter and dropped them into the world of Stranger Things, it would be strange and would not work. The power balance would shift entirely. So these rules for magic are appropriate for the Kids on Brooms setting, and help make this game very much distinct from the base Kids on Bikes. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out this video. I hope it's helped you to learn about the unique mechanics of these various systems, and to help you find some ways that you'll be able to incorporate them if you decide to run this game. There is a lot of potential within them, especially with the Kids on Bikes powered character mechanics, and the intense player agency that your players will get in the Kids on Brooms system. All these mechanics can seem a little odd at first, but once you start playing with them, they really do flow nicely. If this has helped you, please like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification bell so that you can know when the next part goes live. At this point, we've basically covered the rules of all 3 of these games. So next time, we'll be talking about my final thoughts on these systems, what I like about them, what I would change about them, and some of the house mechanics that I have thrown in order to, I believe, make my games fit my players and myself a little better. So make sure you've clicked that notification button to be able to join us when the next part goes live. If you like these games and you'd like to take a try at running them, go ahead and check the description for some affiliate links where you can acquire these games yourself. You'll get to add a new RPG to your collection, and you'll also help support the channel. And finally, if you'd like to stop by for some live tips, or to watch us play a game ourselves, go ahead and follow our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/rpgblender. We recently finished up a Kids on Brooms live game, as well as a Very Merry Alpha Complex Christmas, a paranoia holiday-themed adventure. Anyway, thank you again, and remember, there's gaming outside the Forgotten Realms.